Hi, everyone. My name is Cazzie Williams. I'm a director within the Kearney PERLab. And we're here in Chicago in a place we affectionately call the lab with an industry veteran here, Mr. Jim Wicks, who has many years of experience in engineering, design, development, being an executive at some of the top companies in the world. And what he has done also today is now taken his talents and also experience from the industry and is now giving it back to students. Jim is a director and also a professor at Northwestern University over the management of science program in product development design and also engineering design and innovation. And so we're so glad to have Jim here with us now, and we look forward to having a great conversation with Jim and hearing so much more for our after panel interview. So
Thank
Jim,
you. Thanks for having me. We're looking forward to chat a little bit.
it's such a pleasure to be interviewing you.
Thank you.
I can tell you that there's many of your products over the years that I've worn, that I've played with, that I've had the opportunity to now be a consumer in the market, but also an engineer that's just tore down some of the products too and saw some of the cool things that you actually put within those products.
Awesome.
So I have a couple questions for you today, and I'll start off with our first question, and that is, why are certain products, companies more successful than others when it comes to launching products?
That's a really good question, right? Everybody wants to know the answer to that. Which makes what makes certain companies better at doing this, building, creating, conceiving, and launching great products. I think it's organizations that are able to kind of break down silos within their own organizations, the broader organizations, whether those silos could be kind of software, engineering, supply chain, marketing, design, and have all of those working as one, kind of as one orchestration. I think that's the secret. It's something that everybody would say, yeah, sure, got it. But it's harder said than done. It's often the difference between design thinking and design doing.
Yeah.
And it's, in many ways, it's the holy grail of many product companies to do that. But anybody in the business knows that there seems to always be forces that can make that difficult. So the best ones have leaders across the organization that can work across the organization. And if you're in a design organization, to be successful there, you need to be a design leader that understands what makes the other organizations within the business run, what they need, in order to work across the organization and together build those fantastic products and services.
Thank you for that. You talk about 2 points here, which I think are very interesting. One is breaking down silos, and another is cross-functional leadership. Mm-hmm. Can you maybe explain to us how you've done that in your years of experience in working within the industry as an executive?
Okay. One of the coolest things, or whatever it's the coolest thing, but one of the really important things I did as the head of our design organization, I was with Motorola many years back, and in particularly when we started to do a new series of products called Moto X when we were part of Google, was to realize right ahead of time that everybody really wants to do some pretty cool stuff, right? And those folks in supply chain, in particular, they want to do this. Engineering wants to do this. But timing is super important, right? Typical companies, they bring in a lot of the people in supply chain way too late. And if you're designing a new product, for example, we were doing Moto X and we were doing really multiple micron kind of thickness shavings of wood and bamboo and other materials that we were then co-molding with plastic that were going to be part of the personalization plan that we were using for the Moto X Studio that we created. It was going to be the most personal, first ever, go online, design your own phone system. That supply chain group, and Jeff Lutz in particular was the person, was involved with us way before anything got gated, okay? And they were part of the conceptualization process when we were thinking about that. Up until that point, they were not engaged until, much later. And that difference in timing makes all the difference in the world. And so it means the design team needs to be much more inclusive early, and the organization needs to be able to invest its people, whether it's supply chain, early in the process, right? Because that's time of theirs, right? That's money spent. And supply chain will say, no, you be in the field, make sure we're kind of executing and, you know, implementing with no fails, right? But having some of those key people working up front with the design team, building out proofs of concept, working with our vendors early so that when we later on really want to get into the gated process and make this happen, they weren't in a position where often they are, which is to say we can't do that. And it's not because they're not interested. It's just the time is not possible. And they know that. And it would be irresponsible for them as a leader to say, okay, we'll give it a shot. And then, you know, miss a launch date, right? So it sounds easy, but it's not. Is getting those people, the right types of supply chain people, the right designers involved early that like to work together, they work together, mutually build proof of concept, de-risk things, so you can indeed innovate in that way. And of course, you're involving, you know, the engineering teams up front as well. But this is really the way you need to work in a pre-gate, you know, the pre kind of gated process. And you have to pick and choose those projects. But that's an example of how we did that, and we often did that. And that's how we did some of the most innovative kind of hardware at Motorola. Whether it was from the Razr to Moto X to the Moto 360 watch that we did, which was the very first full round display smartwatches. It's about engaging with your partners early and having a common ownership in what it is and what you're doing. And once the supply chain person feels ownership, once the engineer feels ownership, the likelihood of that design being realized is infinitely higher.
No, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Just hearing more about that area, cross-functional engagement that goes beyond leadership, that translates into design, is a very important point. Can you give some examples outside of the Motorola X of some other areas where that was successful going before the gated process, where everyone felt like time and schedules were getting in the way?
Right. Well, certainly it's hard for me to know the gating and everything, of external companies. Just on the software and services side, I used an example earlier that a fellow that used to work on my team, that used to head up the UX and UI design at Google and Motorola with me, is at Amazon Web Services. And, the way I saw it was, it's an amazing business, that they've grown over time. But he went on as a head of UX and UI design into the business, and immediately recognized, as a designer, he wants to have continuity in terms of how the brand's expressed through the tools and what they're developing out of AWS for their partners within their own organization or the people they partner with. But that story was not going to be anything compelling to everybody else. What was most compelling was the fact that he said, in order to do that, we're going to create a design system. Okay, that design system certainly will create continuity and the right type of uniformity across our tools that everybody's using. But it's also, because of that, going to create massive financial gain and efficiencies. And so it's really about coupling, for them, it was about coupling what they were doing in terms of the expression of the brand and doing better user experience design, whether that user is a developer or another UI designer. But it's about coupling that with the business benefit. And in order to make these pre-gate experiences happen in an organization, to break down these silos, it's absolutely essential that design leaders and other leaders as well, but particularly design leaders that are championing the user experience, whether it's a physical product or a digital or a service, that they're able to not go from their hunch and their instinct, which is a great thing, and creativity is a massive piece of it, but use data to inform the consumer-driven pieces or the user-driven pieces, and use their understanding of the business. And to operate, across an organization within design, you need to be able to understand what's driving everybody else. And you have to understand the business components. You don't have to be an expert, but you need to internalize that, because these things they're together. You don't separate one. And it's not a linear process. They all kind of fit together at various levels in different ways as you progress through the gating process. And so Leaders that understand that and can operationalize it are super valuable within the industry, I believe.
Thank you for that.
Yep.
You talk about one component about obtaining data.
Mhm.
And one thing from my understanding and listen to you is that one of the things you talked about is connecting to the end user. Can you talk a little bit more about how you were able to take data from an end user perspective and connect it back to the businesses you were working with in order to be able to design better products?
Yeah, no, that's a good one. And one of the things that often people in design have struggled with is so much of what we do is subjective or qualitative in the past. And so if someone says, "Show me the data," you can't, like from sales or from a performance test, take quant data. But the best organizations right now are using qualitative. A lot of them are using qualitative data, direct consumer insight or engagement with them, whether it's contextual interviews, ethnography, whatever it might be, and bringing that forward in order to identify opportunities, right? And then it's after that that you start to then mix in quant, right?
Yeah.
And you can use quant early as well, but it's really the most effective way as a design researcher or as a designer or a product developer, I should say, a PM in an organization, is to be somewhat ambidextrous and be able to move, from qual to quant, and how you use that to support your product decisions. And it's often hard to take qual data and support the data. And that's where it's really important for you develop stories. Okay, it's really critical to be able to tell a story that's not Jim the designer or Bill the PM, right?
Yeah.
Or Mary the engineer. It's more about how do you tell stories about that research in a way that tells the emotional piece and uncovers the real, that need that you're trying to satisfy. And then after that, a lot of it does start to be like, okay, how can you quantify how well you're executing towards that target? So,
Thank you for that.